All right, the next item on our agenda is the RTI presentation. So,
Principal Bilesma, as I said, went home ill, so she was going to do the introduction, but RTI stands for Response to Intervention. This is something that all schools have to have in place, and the purpose of Response to Intervention, your ITI program, is to, in short, exhaust all interventions and programs for students at various levels prior to recommending them for special education services. Did I say that right, Johanna?
Yeah, and I'll go into more detail with.
So without further ado, Gail Branken, Director of Special Ed, Johanna Bruckner, our psychologist. Did I say that right, Bruckner?
Yep.
Doug Schultz, Math Department Chair, and Sarah Johnson, English Department Chair.
Thanks for inviting us. Thank you. I believe there should be something that that you all had in your packets. It's a 2-page document. And so I'll just go over just a general overview of RTI and what we're doing in the building. So we started doing this 7 years ago before it became a state mandate. RB was already going forward with this and providing interventions for students and being very systematic about it. RTI, just an overview, is that it's a bunch of just different practices and processes and a model that we can follow for providing instruction and interventions to match the needs of our students in our building. So within that, there's just a multi-tiered system so that you have different levels of support. And then just some key parts from the piece that you have to pull out of there was that first we identify student needs, then we monitor student progress. We provide some evidence-based interventions for students that we see as at risk, and then we adjust interventions, increase or decrease the intensity depending on the student's response to the interventions. So there's a whole process, problem-solving process that we go through. And another important piece is that all students are part of this process. So Tier 1 includes all of our students. It includes, we want to have 80% of our student body receiving high quality instruction with no additional interventions. So that is our goal that we're trying to get to. RB is still wanting to get to that goal. We're not there yet. When we look at kind of just the state assessments that you've seen, we're at about 70%. So we're trying to get more students to be able to reach the goals of being able to access the core curriculum without having to provide additional intensive interventions. So that is an area of focus for us, is just trying to see, are there areas of improvement that we would like to see within Tier 1, and we'll talk more about that later. And then Tier 2 is where you start providing interventions for your at-risk students. So they're of moderate intensity, students that are at risk for academic or behavior difficulties. We have a process in the building that we go through for making decisions on which students need those additional interventions. And the goal is to eliminate the gap between those students and the students that are in Tier 1. And then Tier 3 is where we are providing, again, some evidence-based interventions, but increasing the intensity. These are the students that have the most needs in the building. And at this tier, you don't want to see, more than 5% of our student population. And we're where we should be with that piece. And the goal in this area is to reduce the gap between these students and their peers. So you're trying to kind of move them back down the triangle.
And would our percentages align with what you're seeing right now on this triangle?
So what I was saying with Tier 1, we would like to be able to say 80% of our students do not need additional supports, that they can all access that general curriculum. So that basically means 80% of our students meet standards that we have set as a building, as a district, and that's where we would like to see us at. So if you're looking at more state kind of assessments, it would be around 70%. If we're looking at common assessments, some of the things that we're doing within those, we're still seeing about that same rate when they come in.
About 70.
Does that mean about 25% are tier 2?
So when they come in, that would be the estimate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, every student is getting a specific intervention within that 25%, but when they come in, it's about that rate. When they are sophomores, we do significantly decrease the students that are being served within interventions. So they make progress in our interventions. We don't need to have them in them anymore.
What causes the big gap with incoming freshmen? So why are we at 70 and 25 and 5?
Rather
What's
than
causing
80.
it? Yeah.
I would say that's, it's actually where a lot of the state is at when I'm in my networking, RTI networking meetings. Most of them are actually a lot lower than that, but I think it's just, part of it is we do want to keep working with feeder schools on how we align our interventions and how things feed into each other, so maybe we can prevent some more issues before they even get to high school. And then I think another piece is, you know, we get what we get, and we do want to still work on some things within our core curriculum, which I think both Doug and Sarah will talk to in a minute, just on areas that they see maybe working on some improvements in those.
So they come in, so say like the 25% tier, you look at, a student comes in, those 25% that are tier 2, how do you assess them at the end of the year to say, hey, now they're moved down to tier 1, or maybe, have you ever had a tier 2 go to tier 3?
Yeah, we probably, what happens is students, when they come in, we are automatically doing some standard interventions we know that work for most kids, and they're receiving those interventions. But there's some students that once they're in that intervention, we realize they need some more intense work, and that's probably 10 students within the freshman class that we would beef up some more interventions within their freshman year. And we provide, when they are at that point, we do more looking at individual skills and what other skills they might need to work on. But then we also do monitor progress throughout the year. We have a lot of different assessment tools that are kind of the nationally recognized tools for progress monitoring, and we look at those as reading and math teams, and then decide, is the student making significant progress? If they are, as soon as we can pull back on that intervention, we do. The problem being in a high school is that it's based on classes, so it's hard to pull a student out in the middle of a class. So I think we'll talk a little bit too about just if we see a small need, being able to provide just small supplemental interventions that then we can fade out quickly would be another area that we.
So freshman level starts 70, 25, 5. That class, as it goes through RB, what does it end up to be in the senior year?
So one of the other things is that we really can only, at this point, we provide interventions within freshman year and sophomore year. Junior and senior year, we don't have specific reading and math interventions anymore. It just, at that point, we've reduced the number of students to the point where there's probably sophomore year from that group.
18 to 15 to 18.
Yeah.
From
So
around 80 to 90.
right. So at the end of sophomore year, we're looking at 15 students about
So
after sophomore year.
At the end of the sophomore year, then, tier 1, tier 2, 3, percentage-wise, what is it?
It would be about this piece in terms of who's getting interventions, but I still, we still would like to see the percentage of students that are meeting standards at junior year too. Increase that,
So the assessment, when they're talking about meeting standards, would be the state assessment, the PSAE. To help the board with some familiar terms, in the past you've approved, last spring I believe it was, licenses and software for us for doing MAP testing. Most public schools do NWEA MAP testing, which tests both math and reading. It's also a tool that our feeder schools are using, so this is some of the data dialoguing we're doing with our feeder schools so we can work with students in tracking their MAP scores. And I shouldn't use that word tracking, that's not a good education term. Monitoring,
Yes.
progress monitoring students' MAP scores. We've also, the board's approved Read 180 licenses, so that's an example of interventions. And we're looking at possibly Math 180. Isn't there a Math 180 program, Doug?
There is one out there. We're not currently using it now, but that's an idea that we can go towards a possible Tier 2 intervention for our students.
So Johanna's given you some background. The second phase of the presentation will be more of talking about math and English interventions that we have and some things that we might be lacking, if I'm not mistaken. And the board's, and some introduction to the board. The reason that we're giving this presentation and why you're getting this presentation in December is I want you to think sequentially. The board heard district reports out on academic data and performance through September and October, with a little bit spilling into November. We've talked at different times about then doing some specific interventions in our staffing and enrollment report, looking at class sizes for those core classes freshman year to make sure kids are effective freshman year. The second phase of working and supporting those goals is the RTI. The interventions the specific interventions we can do to say, okay, we've done some Tier 1s with class sizes, we're doing this with our summer school, or we're doing this with Read 180 for our reading students, and now it moves into RTI, which is why you're getting to present. I wanted just to make clear why you're getting a presentation tonight and the timing.
It's okay if I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm still missing part of the concept, so bear with me. This page you gave us, I don't know if it's out there, with the pyramid.
Yes,
It has,
specific to RB pyramid, or the
No,
the
there's
pyramid,
one
this one?
before.
Okay.
you say Tier 3 is 5, Tier 2
Mhm.
is 15,
15.
Tier 1, we'd like to get to Tier 1. I still don't understand, why did somebody pick 80%? Is it some statistical analysis that they did, or,
Mhm.
and said
So-
this is kind of,
An idea.
But I mean, why-
It was picked
why
as
is
the,
it ideal?
it's ideal because when they did research on this, how many years ago? 15, 20 years ago? They could expect that students,
this would be like the norm in the student population.
that
It's-
students
It's really a
could
norm,
reach.
right?
Mhm.
So like when you said, we're at 7, we'd like to get to 80, in
Mhm.
theory, we'd like to get to 90 or 100, but it's not
Right.
possible. is
It
what-
could be
it's
possible.
very
some-
unlikely.
Yeah,
I
but
guess.
if we got to 80, the idea is that then Tier 2, we could really bring some of those students back down, and, the hope is eventually, yes, to get more and more students to be able to access that general
That would make
curriculum.
sense.
So the Tier 2 is so that they get the fixes so that they can come back and access that curriculum.
And the second thing, and maybe Dr. Skink has answered and I didn't quite understand, how do you, what's the methodology for evaluating a student to put them in 1, 2, or 3?
So that's based on, we look at norms for local and national norms on the assessments that we're using.
And there's
we
a
have-
this assessment, every student is assessed for RTI specifically? I mean,
Every student is assessed as incoming 8th graders,
okay.
and using Explore, and then we also have access to their MAP assessments, and we have access to teacher recommendations. So that starts kind of our first screening process. Screening is a huge part of this, and so we have information on all the students, but from that, then knowing that we have specific scores that we look at, and if they're below that score, we would provide an intervention to them. But once they're in that intervention, we also have other secondary screening methods so that we aren't misplacing students. We don't want students to end up in an intervention they don't need. So
Let me ask you, so there's not a test a student takes to say, like a Hogan personality assessment, and say, based on this, you took a lot of different data, make a subjective determination and say that we think they're a 1, we think they're a 2, we think they're a 3?
We assume everybody's a tier 1 until we start looking at their academic and behavioral
Okay,
data through their freshman year.
okay.
Or unless we are notified or provided some recommendations from the feeder schools during articulation and student placement meetings that there might have been some interventions or needs.
But we also know, you know, if we are looking at certain tests, we know from historical records what scores would indicate too, that there might be some additional supports that might be benefit that student. So we've done a lot of that over the years, looking at who are our students that are able to then go on to meet the standards 2 years down the road. And then we also look at the national norms and look at percentile ranks and all of that too.
And then I think maybe our department heads are going to explain it, but you could be in this program in one of the tiers based on a behavioral category or an academic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could be the best behaved student in school, but I behind academically, and I'm in, or I could be the worst behaved student and get straight A's, but I could still be in, right?
Right, and so you would receive, the interventions are not, you know, global interventions. It's based on your needs. So if you're a student that has some difficulties with social emotional learning or with behavior, the intervention is targeted to that need. They're not going to be, you know, placed in one of our other interventions that doesn't fit that need.
And the last question, and maybe it's going to be covered in the next, so you don't have to answer it yet, is, you know, I'm analogizing to what we do with the free and reduced. We have methodologies to keep that confidential, you know, through the food quest and through Tim's office. You know, how do we do these interventions? Is it kind of private for the students, or, you know, how do you do the interventions without them, you know, being labeled that I'm being treated differently or whatever?
Well, part of it is that we don't see this as a labeling process, and that is one of the intentions of this, is to get away from.
Let me ask it more clearly.
Mhm.
I'm asking for a kid to think they're not being labeled,
Mhm.
not whether we as the administration do.
So, students are in, basically, they just know that when they come in, they're in a class. It's not necessarily saying you're getting this because of this, but they know that they had difficulty with reading, and so they're going to take a class, and then they can hopefully hone some of those skills and get out of the class.
What was the number you said by the end of the sophomore year it drops down to?
How many students?
Yeah.
About 15 students.
So isn't that much better than 15%?
It is, yes.
Okay. So even though, is this norm at time of enter into school? Okay. And so what is the progression that is expected based on a norm?
The progression for
Dropping
students.
the 15 down to what is, I know the goal ultimately is to get 100% down to tier 1, but based on a norm, since this is the incoming norm, what is the...
The goal is to get to that 80% that we were talking about.
Right, but
within-
you've reached that by the end of sophomore
By
year.
the end of sophomore year.
Right, even more so, you've reached it higher.
Well,
If you're
part
saying
of, I would say part of it
15
is,
students
part
out
of it is that some of the students can't receive additional interventions when they get to their junior year. They're just not available in the building. And so we get them to a level where they can access that curriculum, but there's still, I would say there's still some students where they're on that bubble where if we had something additionally when they were junior year, they probably would be receiving an intervention.
And it's difficult for me to see the academic side percent versus the emotional side percent, as opposed to lumping together as tiers. I mean, because then if you're coming for additional interventions, where is the majority? And I know to come across as uniform, it's always the same way. I understand it's not. But historically, where has it been? Academically, or has it been emotionally, the issues? And what's the percent been? And it's difficult for me to react to this because of not knowing. Okay.
I think in part the percentages create a challenge that a multi-tiered system of supports speaks strongly to high-quality instruction practices at all places in the triangle. And so at tier 1, that core, it speaks to rigorous instruction that benefits most students. We would work towards it benefiting most students without additional services. For some students, in order for them to be successful within tier 1, they have to have something else in addition to high-quality tier 1 instruction. And then for other students, they need even more than that, or they need something different. But all of our students, even students with special education needs, are represented in the notion of the triangle.
So is your argument that at end of sophomore year, you're way below the 15%? The issue is they fall out of tier 1 in junior and senior year? Because there's no longer that intense intervention? Is that the argument?
The argument is they've met our needs for the most intensive services, but there would still be, in the continuum, it's not, there's not a line between each tier, it's just more continuum. They would probably still, if we could provide it, having just a small supplemental intervention, there would be students in the building that would benefit from that.
So let me ask you a question right now. Given the fact that in sophomore year, it's like, okay, we're done, you're ready to go. What, do other high schools continue this in junior, and do you go all the way to senior year, or just junior year is?
It's a great question, Mr. Cindy, and that's why the department chairs are here, because we wanted to talk tonight to you and the board about having some interventions that after sophomore year, we don't, in a perfect world, you might have a reading class for juniors and seniors or some kind of intervention or something with math all through all 4 years.
And that's my difficulty understanding this. If they don't fall out of tier 1 and there's only 15, and again, I'm not trying to be harsh here, but if it's a lot less than 15%, because 15 is a lot less than 15%, then what is the issue?
So can I ask before we move on? It's clear that we have more in tier 2 because our juniors, when they take their ACT, we only have about 60% or 2/3 meeting state standards.
We're about 68 for reading, if I'm not
68
mistaken,
to 72.
right?
So we have less in tier 1 than we need to be in junior, senior year. So if we use all the different assessments, their grades and their standardized test, and we just put it on a chart, and we just look at a dashboard of what the school's doing, then we know that there's enough seniors that are not in that bottom tier.
I can speak a little bit to that, because here's how I have this difficulty in my head, because at the end of sophomore year, on all of the assessments that we do, they have made growth beyond what is expected for other students that are not receiving interventions. And then they don't get anything after that. So the 2 years that they're in the intervention, our most successful interventions, Read 180 and our
6 minutes. We have quite a few.
our extended algebra, during that time, those students make progress beyond what would be expected for a freshman. And then their junior year, there's that intervention is taken away. So they do make progress each year to the point where there aren't that many students at the end of the year, but then when you start over a new year. So that would be my kind of
The clarifying thing,
hypothesis on that.
I think where the board is
What
stuck a little bit is that although they're making the growth freshman and sophomore year, they might not be meeting where the state standards are.
Right.
Discrepancy between
Right.
what is adequate growth under a progress monitoring system and then what the state of Illinois expects. That's
Right, you don't have to be meet the level for the state testing to be in tier 1, do you? I mean, that's kind of what Laura said, because we only have 66% that meet the standard for being college ready. You didn't explain that that's an analogy to whether you're tier 1 on academics here.
I think the confusion too is that the tiers aren't places.
I understand that.
And I don't like to use the word intervention because an intervention is a special thing for a special kid. I like to use the word instruction. This is how our kids are responding to our instruction. That 80% of our kids in ideal should be responding to our regular instruction in our classes, and they don't need any other help whatsoever.
And that's not
And then-
judged by whether they're college ready.
Correct.
That's a it's not an analogous comparison, right?
Yes. And then there are then another set of percentage of students that need our regular instruction plus something extra.
Right.
And then there's another group of kids that need just a little bit more, is how I understand it the most.
Kevin, I think the other gap in the way it's being, and again, half our presentation hasn't gone, but on the behavioral end, we also had a presentation about our behavioral and we were told those are across all kids at all grades. So somehow you have to
Yes.
differentiate by saying, we don't offer anything after sophomore year, if you're only talking about academically versus behaviorally, because we've been told we do offer behavioral interventions to all of our students for the time they're at the high school.
And I think when it comes to Tier 3 related interventions, and those interventions that will need to go on for many students who are our most at-risk learners, they don't drop off after sophomore year. I think what Johanna is referencing is the intensity of our reading interventions changes after sophomore year.
Right.
So my question, I just want one more clarification of it. And I know we're asking a lot of questions, but it shows you the interest that we have in this. So if I look at a Tier 2 and a Tier 3, and I take that individual Tier 2 and break it up and say, okay, how much is academics related and how much is behavioral related? And then I go into Tier 3, how much is behavioral versus academics? Just a ballpark figure, I'm not asking for specifics, but a ballpark figure where you would see that, percentage-wise. And there might be some that have both,
Saying whether they have both or one or the other.
Yeah, well, or just directionally, where is the behavioral, directionally, where is the academic?
Most of our students, Gail, correct me if I'm wrong, by the time they get to Tier 3, are probably needing some supports on both ends. Is that safe to say? If not behaviorally, social, emotionally?
I would say that that's a fair observation, but
It's
but
hard
not an
because
exclusive observation.
we aren't always, if there's students overlapping, we're not, thinking too much about are they in Tier 2 or 3, so it's hard for me to think in that terminology. But with the behavior side, I would say it would be harder for me to reference whether they're in Tier 2 or 3, because it's not as standardized a process at this point.
Nationally, it's not.
It's harder to, gather some standard behavior data to determine, this student is in this tier, but I think that's.
Normed on a general population of expectations.
Right.
Which is different for academic.
Would it help the board to understand better if you were able to finish the second part of the presentation?
I
and
think we
then
need a chart,
probably-
Mr. Walsh.
I know.
He can build us a chart like last time, and then we'll be
You
able to.
built a nice chart here already.
All right, why don't you
It
start?
might, I think the next part will be, help tie it to what you're seeing in RB too, so that might be good, Jake.
All right, so let's do the second.
Okay, well, thanks. Just can't get enough of you guys. Right?
Welcome back.
Sure, that's what you
Thank
tell
you,
your
thank
family.
you. Here. So in addition to chairing the English department, I've told you before, I also am a reading specialist in the building and work with our emerging readers out there, people who need a little more support there. And if you were to look at the chart that deals with the RB tiered system of supports, you'd be looking at that Tier 2, where approximately 80 to 90 of our freshmen come in needing extended time and practice with a Read 180 model. And by the end of that year, we've progress monitored. We have a team of people that is about, let's see, I wrote this down for you, Mr. Walsh. It's about six people who are teaching, 8 people if you count those who, like Johanna, who help us monitor how well students are growing as readers. So about 8 of us come together and look at our data and determine by the end of the year who has progressed to a point where they are considered in reading. a Tier 1 candidate, I guess, right, student. And then in our second year, we continue Read 180 on a modified approach. Freshman year, it is a period and a half. Sophomore year, it's 1 period. And that's somewhere usually about 15 to 20 students by that sophomore year. So again, they have met particular criteria in terms of how quickly they read, how well they write, whole litany of tests on that sophomore year. Junior year, we are currently without anything in reading. And so, Kevin, would you like me to talk about that now, or you want me to wait on that? Or?
Have at it.
Okay. So you see that your chart is color-coded. The RB multi-tier system is color-coded, with black being what we have, with red being what we would desire or believe we need. And so we're looking at a couple of ideas, being able to attach a reading specialist to our freshman group in some of what are Tier 1 classes. So Western Civilization, biology, certainly English, to make sure that we are giving those students the highest quality instruction based on good reading practices, writing practices across that, across the continuum. And we would hope too to, again, focus on those freshmen, as we've been doing in this past year, to have a reading specialist be able to then target, reteach certain students in places in the building where they might be available. Perhaps that would be academic support, perhaps that would be other places. So that's what we would seek to add, a literacy coaching model, which we've had in the past. And secondly, we're looking also to add something to our CAP classes. Currently, without getting into too many specifics, we're combining English and reading. You know, there's 4 parts of the test, and we combine English and reading as an approach. For our neediest students, again, that 10 to 15% of students that need more in the junior year, we would seek to add a reading-focused block in that class. And it's complicated. I could get into it more at another time, but we believe that the CAP class would be a place where we could provide a Tier 2 intervention for those students who aren't getting it in the junior year.
So one thing that we've discussed, and we have not had any formal proposals from the building on this yet, nor have we had any formal discussions with the building and myself yet, but trying to create that bridge so that those students that need the additional reading after sophomore year, finding a place or a class that we can just offer. Also for those students that are sophomores and reach grade level or their RIT score is closer to where they need to be as a sophomore, they've kind of locked in the Read 180 for the whole year. And the way our staffing and our scheduling is, it's tight, so it's not like, hey, at the middle of the semester you can go and get out of the Read 180 but get into another reading intervention class that's maybe not as intensive. So those are some things I think systemically we have to look systemically on our whole reading program, freshman through 9th through 12th grade, and that's something we're just starting to do. But what Sarah's laying out here tonight is that we will be coming back with some proposals after when second semester starts, with staffing and budgetary needs that we might have to fill some of these gaps of interventions, and these are directly related to the district goals and tracking and progress monitoring the district goals in regards to reading and being college ready at a reading level.
And I'm sorry, I just wanted to say we did meet AYP in reading this year.
Did what you say?
We met AYP in reading this year,
Okay,
which
right.
we're pretty proud of. And that's 7 years of hard work of tooling these interventions down to a very specific place. As you know, and I know it's not a perfect lock, that PSA doesn't mean necessarily, doesn't align with the tiers in a perfect way, but that standard will go up, and we would like to keep chasing it.
I think the board just gets a little concerned because when they hear from the state side, how many of your kids are reading at, are reading where they're supposed to be. But I think that's why the board adopted the goals with the college readiness reading level based on the national ACT score. And I think we're doing even better than that.
We are.
Do you have students then that emerge as emergent tier 2 come junior year, where they may have been on the kind of on the cusp, freshman, sophomore, just making it, but
Right.
now by junior year, where they hadn't needed any intervention, now junior year, when there is none, they actually need something. Classes are harder and they need something, and they're just without.
To reading. It's the students we knew.
We've identified them, unless, of course,
They come to us later.
Okay.
which we
Yep.
we see. Many of our transfer students do not. Well, I shouldn't say that.
I'm not talking about
We-
transfer students, I'm talking about somebody who could have been here freshman, sophomore, BC student, kind of making all of a sudden junior year, not really able to make it anymore.
We use, I mean, we
That
use
doesn't really
CAP.
happen.
It's not an intervention, but we try to, we kind of use it as one when we identify kids that are struggling.
Okay.
We can't force them to take CAP, but we highly encourage it for kids to be, it's kind of stepsister of an intervention for us. So we do kind of funnel kids that might need a little extra help. I know it's not ideal and it doesn't have the flexibility that we're looking for, but it is something that we kind of use as a vehicle.
But the students for that would be, most of the time, students that we recognize within their freshman year, that there's a skill deficit or an area that we need to work on.
Sarah, Doug, if there was an easy intervention that the board can consider with a proposal or recommendation from the principal or myself second semester, is the easiest fix. Not the easy, like there's an easy fix, but
Right.
an easy intervention would be adding that reading component to CAP. So is that a section or two of reading? Is that a reading teacher?
That's a reading teacher added to the CAP rotation.
And there's 5 sections of CAP, so where they would have 5 classes a day of just teaching junior reading?
There's not 5 sections.
There's
Right, so when you say adding a
4.
reading teacher, my board thinks, and that's 1.0 FTE.
No.
Are we looking at 1.0 FTE,
No,
or are
it'd be
we
a
saying
0.4.
0.4
It
FTE?
would be a 0.4 if you
That's a
added
good way to
the
start,
Added
because that
it
helped
to
me
both.
massage this in here a little bit.
If you added it to both, you could add it to the most needy, too, which would be a 0.2, right? Because there's a
Okay?
year-long. and
There's a
then
year-long
then
CAP,
there's
and then there's semester
semester.
CAP.
Right.
But if we wanted to run the CAP program, how you, as the experts would say, CAP should run, reading, English, a math, and a science.
Right.
Right
Maybe a
now, we're
0.4.
running reading / English.
Right.
Math and science.
And bringing back other historicals, that is the format of CAP in when it originated. And we also had other variations where we brought a special ed component in for the kids that got services to teach them how to take a test with accommodations. We brought in a ELL component to teach those students that had those needs to take a test with those accommodations. So we've had other variations that had more people, but definitely a reading component would be a going back to something we've done before that we've seen success with.
So my question to you is, if we have a transfer student that doesn't come in freshman year, but maybe comes in sophomore, junior year, do we look at those kids? I mean, but even a junior, because in sophomore we're done. We look at those kids though, and
Well, it's not that we're
Sometimes
done.
if we're able to, we can fit them into a sophomore
Right.
Okay.
reading class. And when they come in, we do the same screening process we do for all
See, the thing that's,
So, I have a question. So is it, with the dramatic improvement after freshman year, is it fair to say that if we put more focus working with our feeder schools to get them to have their students better prepared coming in here, would be able to have less resources that freshman year to share across the board for those students? I mean, it indicates to me that a lot of these students are not, and I'm probably going to get yelled at by the feeder districts, they're not coming in fully prepared based on the fact that within a year's time, there's a mass amount of improvement. I mean, I don't want you to go and
Well,
speak-
we've talked with feeders about and want to continue discussion on some of the interventions we've found great success with, Read 180 being one of them. And, you know, the other piece that we always want to focus on is focus the attention on Tier 1. You get the most
Right.
bang for your buck. So,
But with that amount of improvement that freshman year, that to me, it tells me that there's a good degree of students not coming in fully prepared where they should have been. And if we spend more time with the feeder districts,
The one you want to
getting them.
talk about the, you know, the kind of the aha moment we had with the feeders during the Joint Institute, or?
Well, Dr. Skinkis, you were part of that, so you, I mean, you opened their eyes to be able to say, to talk within their language, where our language was the Explore Plan and ACT, that E-Pass, and trying to get kids to grow. But our feeder schools don't talk about the ACT. It's not their test. They don't even, I mean, the Explore test, even though it's an 8th grade test, it's not their test. So you were able to talk to them in the language of math and give them that correlation of, okay, this is at grade level for us at the Explore, which correlates to this in the MAP test. And that opened their eyes, saying our kids are not where the MAP test people are saying that they are at grade level. So
The superintendents and the principals at the grammar schools are looking to meet their state standards, which are based off the ISAT. And next year will be, you know, that's why they changed the ISAT levels. So when we were saying to the feeder schools where the students are coming in at, they're having trouble scoring where they need to be on the Explore and eventually the Plan and eventually the ACT. But the scores on the ISATs from the K through 8 levels were very, very good. But they're two totally different tests, and the state has acknowledged that those two tests do not correlate. So what we were able to do through math, English, and Miss Smetana is to get everybody in one room at the Joint Institute and start showing where our Explore scores for their, you know, previous classes were coming in at, and how they were scoring on the ISAT, and how the correlation was not the same. And we're having, since then, we've had some great articulation, and the feeder schools have been very
Just
open
last
to
week.
working with us. So.
We have to keep on having those.
Just a notion I would like to add is that the description that Sarah offered beyond sophomore year for students, even if they've closed the gap, they have not necessarily completely closed the gap, interventions going forward are about applying what I've learned to
Right.
rich curriculum across English, math, science, and social studies, and learning how to apply those compensatory strategies, which aren't necessarily the focus of the intensive intervention at Tier 2 or Tier 3. So to expect students to make that shift completely on their own without continuing instructional practices that we know work puts them at risk of returning, you know, the recidivism to poor outcomes in reading and math and or on the behavior side. So I think it's about extending them, not with the same focus, but towards application.
As we start to wrap up,
We haven't had.
behaviors.
I don't have to
I don't see
Yeah,
any
sure.
red. I don't see any
There
red
is.
with hand.
There is.
I think it's all right. It's Sarah's world in the reading world is just at a different place than the math world, and that's not the RB place. It's the global place. The interventions that are available in the reading are just different than, and they're more robust and they're research based. And you can see we invested into that research based intervention for our students, and it's paid off. The meeting AYP is a great thing, especially at this point. So the way we have to look at interventions in the math world is a little different. It's more like putting our time and effort in our Tier 1 for that preventive medicine. Please don't think that I'm thinking that our kids that are in Tier 2 and Tier 1 or Tier 3 are sick in any way, but if we can make that Tier 1 as good as possible, then we feel then everything else will fall in line. As you can see, one of my reds is researching and finding a research-based Tier 1 curriculum for all. So our Algebra 1 curriculum, I will be proposing a new curriculum in January to hopefully adopt. The push for Common Core is there for all. The alignment to our PARCC testing is there. The material is starting to come in, and it's coming in with high quality. It's coming in very well. Right now, I have books from Pearson, from McGraw-Hill, and from Carnegie that I want to research that we know schools are using in the area. They're getting success out of it, and something that I want to bring to the board in January. Our Tier 2 intervention, it's been with us for a while. We've gotten great success from it. It's our extended time in practice. Our Algebra 1 extended time in practice kids are taking a period and a half of Algebra 1, but it's the exact same Algebra 1 that all the other students are taking. Exact same finals. Weekly quizzes are aligned through our PLC, and we have the data to show you, if you are interested, that our kids are actually outperforming the kids that aren't getting that extra time. And what we've seen and what we've kind of decided about sophomore year, why isn't there something there for our kids' sophomore year, is because time and a half is very restrictive on our kids' schedule. We sell RB to our community in a very good way, almost too good at sometimes. They have many opportunities when they come to RB, from the arts to the applied arts to, and if I keep on telling them, no, you have to take a period and a half of math, they're gonna drive me out of here pretty quick, even though we think that they might need it. So we do have co-taught geometry, we do have co-taught, but that's not really a Tier 2 intervention. That's more there for a student's needs if it's in their IEP, or maybe we can funnel a kid that might be struggling into a situation where there's 2 teachers there. So there are interventions starting to pop up for us, like a Math 180. That doesn't have to be that, but that's something that I want to definitely investigate for future purposes. But I really want to put my time and effort and focus on getting an aligned Tier 1 curriculum for algebra that will then carry on for geometry and algebra 2.
Can you talk a little bit about the supplemental piece
I was
of
gonna
that,
say
which
that.
would then extend
Mhm.
into Tier 2?
So all these, the publishers know the needs now. So these publishers are creating built-in computer-based interventions. They are building different things that will help kids that struggle. They're building curriculums that could be pushed to one-to-one. So all this stuff is coming to us, and we're researching their flexibility. So when a proposal might not be for a book for every kid, it might be a book for every student in the classroom, but then a online book that they can access at home. It might be a curriculum where they can get some individual help based off their needs. Another thing that I'm looking into and really working with Sarah about is trying to find an intervention that's more flexible. I mean, being in our stringent 7 periods a day, we need to give kids help when they need help, but it doesn't mean that they have to be there the whole time. So I'd like to look at our vehicle of academic support and find some way to give kids more specific help when they need it, but not force them to be in there at all times. So I know there's several schools that do resource centers, drop-in centers, all those type of proposals are out there, and we're starting to look at to maybe give us something more that later down the line that is a little more flexible.
That also speaks to the idea that in Tier 2 services can be and should be time limited if they're done with fidelity, if they're implemented with fidelity, that you can close that gap more quickly, and a student can then not need that service at long term.
Like Sarah served several years ago as the reading specialist that pushed reading curriculum into the other fields. We also served several years ago as intervention specialists, where I spent some of my day going into academic supports and providing services for kids if they're struggling when they're identified from their students. So we have some things that we've done in the past before budget constraints came that maybe we could start looking at and revisiting to see how we can help our kids the best.
And I would just recommend, as we do look at these, the board's familiar with receiving these presentations, that we tier them so that we look at what's going to have the largest impact for the largest group of students.
Tier 1.
Yeah, and then
Tier
work.
one, tier one.
Well, I mean, there's going to be some additional interventions, but then make sure
By all
we're
means.
working those through Ms. Matana and how they fit with the curriculum, and we'll start doing proposals with the board second semester and in the spring.
So why is there only 2 departments within these tier systems? Where's science?
So math and reading, the purpose of this is to get those basic skills, get the skills needed So then you could access things like science and social studies as well. And that's why she was speaking to the literacy coaching that would go across those subject areas. So it would be more reading within those areas, that skill. So a specific a science or a social studies intervention to figure out what you would target as a skill for that would be very difficult. It would be, which is why we focus on math and reading. And also because the genesis of RTI was to provide those, to bring those skill deficits down so that they could access things like science and social studies.
We definitely do have tiers within our science department. We do identify the kids the same way as we do with our multiple assessments and recommendations and things to it. They're just not part of the original idea of RTI.
But part of- but I would say
I
with-
assumed it was part of the original definition
Yeah.
of the RTI group.
Yeah.
That's why it's
But,
math and science.
and even within that, for the students, that the reason why they would be getting that would be to also provide beef up that reading skills.
Right.
So
There's their reading
Yep,
skills,
it's
yes.
pretty much based on reading.
Any other questions for the group?
I have a couple of questions, so I'll ask the two. In math, it seems that there are, it's so variable. There are some schools where the 8th grade, they're doing freshman algebra. And so when they're coming to high school, they're definitely going to be a step ahead, but it's not across all schools. So you have 8th graders in this large continuum between doing general arithmetic from advanced algebra, and then they all come freshman year and they're taking a standardized test. So already some are advantaged. I wonder if that's playing into some of our discrepancies or where our kids are coming in. And then from what I hear, there is more development on online schools, online classes, even at the state level. Is that a resource that may become available to us to supplement or?
We use some now.
Okay.
We use, we're starting to adopt Math Excel, which is an online environment. There's some free ones out there. Dan Monahan uses Khan Academy as an online environment to supplement. But I've discussed with the board before about our future, maybe 2 years, 3-year vision or plan, that when our junior highs are fully in compliant with Common Core, they will be doing about 60% of our Algebra 1 curriculum. So our adjustment will have to be where majority of our students, if they're at grade level, will be starting in geometry. So that is something that we've already talked about. We've discussed it in our articulation, because there has to be some conversation of readiness. When will RB need to make that adjustment? When will the junior highs be actually performing that level of algebra? And then we'll have to make that adjustment. And I expect that maybe in 2 to 3 years, where our sequence of math will change a little bit. We go for a regular level student, be a geometry and algebra 2, and then their third year, their junior year, would be a pre-calculus class. So then they would have that advantage of a little bit more than what they normally be doing.
So that gap, just given time,
It
should
takes a little
close a
time.
little bit. Yeah.
And
okay.
it will then require us to do a little less reteaching, but then
Okay.
some topics might be new when they see them in algebra 2 less, instead of just reteaching a topic.
Any other questions for the
Yeah,
group?
I have a couple of questions. One is, in the whole scheme, does this include IEP, students with IEP plan also? So, again, I'm certainly a neophyte understanding it, but certain of those kids, as far as academically, might not be able to get a tier 1, regardless of what we do for them, right?
That's accurate, Mr. Walsh. And
Okay.
so some of our most significantly challenged learners receive most of their services through intensive individualized Tier 3 alternative curriculum.
Okay.
But that's about, if you look at all of the students with IEPs in our school, it's still within that 3 to 5%
Okay.
range.
The second question I had is, you know, all of these sound like good things, and we have to weigh the cost benefit and which have the best hit, like Dr. Skink has said. But you also, let me just, you know, how about other things? Like, does the National Honor Society used to tutor kids, make it free and available as part of it? I mean, is there an expectation that some kids will take advantage of some of the resources that are here on their own? Or it sounds like part of your plan, and maybe it's the only way to do it, is you're basically building a curriculum where they have to do it as part of their grade, as opposed to, if they need some help, there's other alternatives out there.
NHS still tutors. They have offerings before school, after school, and during fourth hour, and then those NHS members get service hours for that
Right.
time. And we definitely use that as kind of a menu for our kids that struggle, saying,
Okay.
hey, you're struggling. I definitely, first thing we want you to do is go to that teacher and try to figure out where the point of struggling occurred. But if that doesn't work, here's another place you can go to. You can go to, multiple places, but yeah, that is definitely part of the conversation.
And the last question I have, and I thought we read odds last time we talked, Ms. Johnson, but now you're suggesting more people should take CAP, which was a suggestion. But interesting the way you described it, because I had the impression, at least for my student who's in it, it's somebody who wants to, he doesn't need necessarily, maybe he does in some classes, but support, but he wanted to improve his testing skills. So how do you address that, whether you do it with or without the additional teacher, where you're able to, tailor a course like that so that I would guess the majority of the kids are at least average or above average students trying to improve their testing ability for their standardized tests, versus some kids you're recommending to go into it where they, not that it's not going to help them improve their testing, but you're also helping them to improve their average skills to get into regular courses.
We do try very hard to distinguish between who would take a full year CAP, who would take a half year CAP, and who would take the before, after school, and weekend CAPs. So there's multiple offerings,
Right.
and some students, not so many the full year, but some students will take the half year and the weekends, so they'll really go after it. The ones who want that 2-point bump will do
Right.
that. But it is much like teaching a one-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
And on the craziest days, you have 2 different timers going
Okay.
for the same group of kids. You stop, move on to this. It's
Okay.
it's complicated, but and they do some diagnosing, if you will, of is your weak spot reading, is your weak spot science, is your
Okay.
weak spot
And they're different prescriptions. The year-long CAP is where the intention or the purpose is to get a kid that might be below grade level, and you have a longer time to get them above.
Right.
Where the first semester CAP, we are probably not this specific anymore, but it used to be where that was kind of our high-level students that just wanted a little more boost.
Right.
And the second semester were the kind of mid-range kids that we want to get them ready and make sure
Right
it's
before.
fresh right before the test.
Okay.
So there's no gap. So we do provide different services based on their needs.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I know Mr. Cindy wants us to move on. One thing that comes up to the board a lot, and I think they're actually looking at something tonight, academic support is considered what?
Within this.
That's a
So-
conversation we've had a lot of times,
Mhm.
yes.
Nationally, it would not be considered an evidence-based program. In terms of RB's supports, it's probably in that tier 2 area in our
Right.
multi-tiered system of supports, because not every single student would be recommended to consider.
And the reason I'm asking is the board has approved additional academic support at the start of this school year that was presented as a need from the building. And we're actually looking at some additional academic support tonight, but there some shift in our tier 1 money. So I
Well-
just want them to understand that this is helping support the goals and.
By-
And with that piece, I would say, the intention of beefing up the idea of making it a place for some supplemental instruction, but also within their, it's not behavioral, but there are academic behaviors that they're working on in there, some good student behaviors.
Executive function.
Right.
Okay.
So while it doesn't necessarily fit criteria for being in this tier or this tier, it is a place where students are gaining more skills for that.
Have we ever thought about doing academic support for sophomores, possibly juniors.
It used to be throughout.
We used to have
And right now, we're running it strictly at
there's some
There's
sophomores.
some sophomores.
some sophomores.
There's some
The one,
juniors.
some juniors,
Okay.
ones that were recognized as freshman year, it seems like it's a little more
Oh, it's-
open. and
Primarily,
then
primarily, it
it's-
seems freshmen, right? Okay.
And structurally, it's not set up in a way currently to be able to achieve the supplemental supports and interventions that could be potentially useful to students who take that approach to a guided study. So we would just need to look structurally at creative ways to ensure that students had access with integrity to the intervention.
Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the academic support first started, students were kind of paired with their mentor, and that mentor followed them for the 4 years, right? And so they did get some of the executive functioning help, and they were expected to work on their own unless they needed some targeted kind of help, but it helped them progress.
When I started 12 years ago at RB, we started a looping process. So there was the same math teacher, English teacher, and academic support and counselor team that
Okay.
stayed with a group of students for 3 years.
Okay.
So when I started, it was myself, Mr. Forberg, Mr. Reingruber was our academic support person, and then we went with our students, and then we were responsible for the education to get them prepared for the testing throughout that time. So yes, support was a heavy piece of that, to teach them study skills, to reteach a topic that they didn't understand, and it's changed throughout the years, but that was the original thought of it.
So did that change because of budget cuts, or, I mean, my son, Miss Ramsey, I don't think she's Miss Ramsey now, was when she
Alice.
first came in, saw my son through about 3 years, and then he needed less and less, as he went through. Did that change because we had evidence that the program wasn't working, or because of budget cuts and we couldn't afford it?
Your looping process stopped when? Longer than 3 years ago.
Yes.
6 years ago.
6
I
years
would say
ago.
6 years ago.
We still had a couple of leftover ones, but
There wasn't any proof of the program not working. Again, we had some self-discovery of how restrictive that was. Again, if a student had 3 years of academic support, that took away a lot of opportunities in other places for them. So we just have struggled with telling kids, no, you need to lose an extra period of your day to get this extra help.
Those classes were very small.
Mhm.
Is the Read
there was
180?
there was some.
They were-
Yeah, the
budget.
supports were
There
about
was some
12
budget
kids
adjustment.
Is
total.
the Read 180 a 90-minute class or a regular?
Yes.
77.
Yes, it said period and a half freshman
Right,
year.
so I think the board needs to understand, so if it's a period and a half for that, a period and a
Right.
half for extended algebra, and we
Right.
give you academic support, you really have, now you're down to picking 4 classes, so then where you start getting into some issues,
That's 4 of your 7.
4 or your 7, so
It was in black and
students
white.
then can't, maybe if they want to take a foreign language, they got to still fill their PE requirement. I want to be in choir, I want to take autos.
Which is
The
also
looping was
why it gets
different.
harder,
Right.
too, by junior year, because now you're taking, junior year's difficult. So you're taking these really difficult classes, and those supports have been gradually tiered down, but.
We got a lot of work to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for
Thank
presenting
you.
tonight, and
Thank
we
you.
also
Thank
look
you.
forward to hearing your suggestions the second semester.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Holidays to everyone.
You too.
You too.